Flash games. The most accessible kind of games during my time as far back as being an elementary student. You didn't have to buy a CD or download a 18GB game. You just had to have a browser on your computer, even laptop, and you could play it right away so long as you had internet access. It was a hive of creativity, both good and bad, as this was considered the quote-unquote Wild West era of the internet. Perhaps a little bit before that, but this was still a time where artists, creators, and the like had their own websites rather than being in some kind of social media. Games would vary from simple and visually child-friendly to extreme gore and violence with blatant nudity or extreme sexual content. Honestly, being a child with unrestricted access to the internet was unhealthy for my mental health. But at the same time, early exposure to it made me reflect and change earlier than if I had started having problems now. However, I'm not here to talk about some psychological horror story regarding my time with Flash games, but one Flash game or two in particular, with a certain artist that has made his mark on this world with his own recognizable style, vast portfolio, and even some drama within the people he worked for. But controversies aside, his merit as an artist made a huge impact on me. He was one of the artists that when you would look at the pictures he made, he was instantly recognizable. Especially with his theme of eldritch demonic shenanigans combined with sci-fi and this simple, fluid style of drawing and animation. From working at a company to making independent art and games nowadays, Miltonius, or Milton Poole, would be one of the artists that influenced me. Long ago, when I was around 3rd grade, a friend of mine told me of a better game on the internet, outside of Facebook games and without needing to download anything. It was the online RPG called Adventure Quest, and from there, I was hooked. It was a single-player browser game RPG filled with inconsistency but flowing with charm. Exploring around the web pages associated with it led me to playing Dragon Fable, another web RPG but with better graphics and basically an upgrade from Adventure Quest. And eventually, the MMORPG Adventure Quest Worlds. All of these games being tied to the same company, Artix Entertainment. Now, I do believe these games still exist and are still running so long as you have the launcher for them, which is essentially just a Flash engine in order to run the games locally. But nevertheless, Adventure Quest Worlds was different. Unlike Adventure Quest and Dragon Fable, the game was multiplayer, which meant that I could see other people and unfortunately compare myself to them as I played through the game. The game itself is basically a parody of the fantasy genre, mixed in with like sci-fi, steampunk, and other stuff. It's a mess, but it's a fun mess, with some decent written stories to adventure along with for an MMORPG of its time. The game itself is basically a parody of the fantasy genre in general. But again, as I would play through the game, I keep seeing other people with such cool gear, amazing aesthetics, whether a set or a combination of different items. In an attempt to acquire such cool stuff, I would look at the character pages of the people who I thought had cool items. This would make me surf the wiki for the game a lot, trying to find locations, shops, and getting disappointed when I discovered that the item I wanted was for members only or costed an exuberant amount of premium currency. But soon, I would come across items that had a dash of Miltonius at the end of their name, and at least 90% of the time, they were oddly cool and edgy. But most importantly, many of them were not members only, or used premium currency. These items I would trace back into the wiki and in-game. It had me go through different maps and collect different items in order to access a secret area that would introduce me to a world of hurt. The secret area was more of an open secret. Everyone kind of knew it if they searched for it. Even without the secret area, pets like Mini Miltonius or Drugen the Assistant were scattered amongst players, and I would just hop on to fight the mana elemental alongside other people farming, or fight Asterion to get some of the Dash of Miltonius stuff from Spin the Wheel. Otherwise, my gold would run out from buying a bunch of blood cloaks. Admittedly, they weren't as cool as those in more deeper quests and secret areas, but they were a start. Speaking of which, the secret area could only be accessed with a bunch of stuff from all over the world. Miscellaneous stuff from monster drops or drops from bosses throughout the story. This kind of incentivized me to play through the story so that I could access the secret areas more, because essentially Tersosinuatlim, or Miltonius' secret, was an endgame area, and as such was designed to be played after you finished the main stuff. Lastly, I'd like to share the items I prided on attaining back in 2012 or so, which was the Crimson Plate of Miltonius, which was one of the easier ones, but still I had to farm like 300 enemies to get 3 totems. And the drops were not 100%, so I had to fight more than 300 of them technically. And a Tainted Claymore, which was even easier. But do note that I didn't play this game for hours on end farming, rather maybe 20 minutes to an hour a day in my parents' office. A little later into the future, I got the Ungodly Reavers and Claws when I had more time to spare, but I think they were not as fulfilling to get anymore. Well, that's about what I'd like to share. Now, by some point back then, I was curious about the characters in-game, and one thing that changed my entire perspective on this MMORPG world was that these characters were based on real people, and of course, Miltonius was a real person. An artist, in fact, who made one, if not the foundational art of AQ Worlds. Though there were other artists such as J6, who if I remember correctly drew the backgrounds. But going back to the topic, Miltonius, the guy who made the cool items in secret areas, was an artist with his own website. I believe it was called miltoniusarts.com, but searching it nowadays I don't find it anymore. The website was so cool. All the pages were designed in a way that made you feel like you were in the dark abyss with matching themes. I often visited the website on my little laptop as a junior high schooler, just getting inspired by all his art. It was a defined style. The fully rendered paintings just blew me away. Even the sketches looked great by themselves. I think nowadays you can still see Miltonius' gallery, but it's on a social media site like Instagram or Twitter, so you don't really get the same experience than if you had viewed his art on his past website. But other than his paintings, concept art and sketches, he was also a heavy hitter in animations and was more so known for that more than anything else. I remember his animation of Miltonius fighting giant undead mechs, casting a fireball, cleaving them with his spear, and infiltrating some kind of meeting with a High Lord in a sci-fi fantasy setting like edgy demonic dark fantasy. Not to mention, he was also the one who animated the Dragon Fable animation called Artix vs the Undead, which also blew my mind, at least at that time. Though I was 12 or 13 at that time, a lot of things blew my mind. Over the years though, I found he had a YouTube channel where he would animate other stuff like She-Thor vs the Undead Hulk or Kylo Ren vs Master Chief. And if I remember correctly, this was around the time where a big event of Dage the Evil versus Nulgath, which was what Miltonius evolved to in the game, happened. Or maybe my timeline as a kid had all these things mixed up. They even had a trailer for the event in such a cool animation, which I now remember was also the introduction of Oversoul, which was Miltonius' game if I remember correctly. That game was like AQ Worlds, but by Miltonius rather than Artix. And in the game, you basically collect bodies, I guess. And as the quote-unquote Oversoul, you get to wear them as your meat suits and evolve them after leveling up. That game was kind of short-lived. It was this cool new little thing back then, and I remember playing Oversoul during lunch breaks in junior high, evolving my Blood Fiend, my Aberrant, Jack Frost, and Darkon Drago. It was a fun little game, but I think it had been abandoned because when I checked it out the last time, around 2022, it didn't have any updates or events of note. which is a shame, but who am I to judge what happens behind the production of a game? The most professional thing I ever did was make a long-ass comic. Producing a game is an entirely different beast that takes a team to make right, and it's leagues beyond difficult, at least a game of that scale. I believe nowadays, as I've checked as recently as this year, Miltonius has been working on Akumi the game, Akumi Wars in specific, which is his own sort of bounty hunter hiring game based on his original world where many of his animations took place in. Now, I think everyone kind of knows, or just plainly knows, that he does NSFW art and animations. Because as a kid, I found one of them. Thankfully only one of them, which was set in the world of Akumi, where this giant alien guy does something to an innocent guard woman, an act that was very bad, and so Akumi sliced his leg off. I guess I don't really mind him doing NSFW, especially now that I'm an adult, but being at that time doing a game that was mainly targeted around children, like me who was still a child back then, and found one of his NSFW animations, situations like that might have been the reason why things were rocky behind the scenes and why Miltonius suspiciously quote-unquote evolved into Nulgath, since Miltonius was a part of the world where those NSFW things happened. Miltonius doing NSFW art and animations doesn't really bother me now, but it would have been and was problematic when I found out about such stuff as a kid. I'm not making this sound too egregious or anything, it's just that pornography has been a problem of mine, and to see that one of the artists that I looked up to contribute to such things kind of creates dissonance. But as a mature adult, hey, everyone has their thing. And even I believe in one of his videos, he does double down on the NSFW aspect of his art, which is and was kind of always his style and thing that was sort of repressed back then. And the game he's making right now, Akumi Wars, is not targeting children at all, unlike AQW. It is an adult game and is advertised as such, though the game is more of action than anything else, so not even that is a problem. It's adult but not necessarily super NSFW. In the end, Miltonius is living life as an artist with his craft, his own thing, his own style, game and world and such. Which was the reason why I looked up to him in the first place, minus the NSFW stuff, but as an adult, it's not really that bad. He will forever be my reference and inspiration for dark eldritch fantasy mixed with sci-fi, as well as expectations for the hurdles on being an artist. Because in the vlogs he used to make, I kind of had a glimpse of what it meant being an artist in his time, and often the realities he faced and the struggles he had to go through. So it was pretty insightful in a way, his vlogs and stuff, though I'm not sure if those are still publicly available anymore. What I remember distinctly was that in his vlogs, he would put a bar on the side and have his age be labeled as level. Other than that, Miltonius is a cool guy. His art to me was like Jazza, but full of edge. Nowadays, I look back and appreciate his artistic influence. Even now when I do draw mythical demons or sometimes in sci-fi, I borrow some elements of his, albeit discreetly. And so, that's my artist appreciation for Miltonius. If you like this video, I would appreciate a like, perhaps a subscribe. Nevertheless, I have a comic of my own and I would like to encourage you to take a look at it in the link down below. That's all for today, and until then, I'll see you.